many times have we seen where a client made a feature, the product owner thought that the CEO, whoever thought the feature was going to be valuable, and it turns out nobody's using it?
Yeah, all the time. In the world of UX UI, we have a lot of designers out there that really generate beautiful work. It's creative work and they're talented artists. But I think where they struggle is make their process understandable to those that are not designers. Business leaders are not designers by nature. They're business people. They understand the problem. They are subject matter experts in the industries they work in. What I found a lot of times in service or product opportunities, there's a lot of risk associated with taking new ideas to market. And what I found is that you can reduce risk through a design process.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Inexperienced Impact podcast, where we interview one of the talented designers on our team.
Where are they?
As you know, we're filming a few different episodes where we go through and ask specific questions around members of our team, so the audience, anybody listening, can get to know who they are, what they do, if they do anything. And today we have the infamous Scott Harden, who's been with us for how long now?
Since 2019, I believe.
Okay.
2019, yeah.
So yeah, he's been my, what we call the Troublemaker, who's the chief product strategist, or is it chief troublemaker product strategist? One of those.
I think somewhere I've seen it written that I was a chief product design strategist.
There you go.
But I like to tell the clients that I make good trouble helping them figure out solutions to problems they didn't even know they had.
Well, welcome to the show. And Scott, let's just jump right in and tell me a little bit about how you got started in UX and what piqued your interest in getting into the whole user experience design and product strategy.
Well, that could just take up the whole show, but I'm Scott Harden, Chief Product Design Strategist for IiMPACT, and I've been with the organization since 2019. Makoto and I have been friends in the industry for many years prior to that, where we worked together at various, agencies and projects. And so he felt that it was important to bring me in and mess things up. So that's what I did. But my journey to UX, it's a meandering one. It's not something that I went to school for. I went to UCLA Film School back in the late 90s and graduated with a film degree. And I came out, and for a number of years after film school, I was a film editor, and I was editing zero budget films, trying to get them into Sundance, various film festivals. But many of my colleagues, it was hard to live in LA and make a living. I didn't have a rich uncle. And so I had to try to make it in LA while these projects that essentially, were almost zero to no pay to low pay. And so from that, I was trying to find a side hustle. So I ended up working this was 96, 97. And so you may have heard about something called the internet. It came around at that time. And so I was able to teach myself HTML, and I started getting into kind of a little design career. And so I ended up designing web pages, the likes of which you would cringe to look at today. But I ended up working for clients like Liz Claiborne, Lucky Jeans, Skechers. So a lot of fashion in LA was the opportunity. And so I had a little name for myself as a early innovator as far as that goes, and started my own business really early on, kind of a little web design agency, and started to make good money doing that. And then as the more people came about and kind of it became more competitive, I ended up partnering up with a partner. We had on the shores of Venice Beach, we created a Subvergent Media Studios, and we ended up developing a really early e-commerce platform. And we sold it to a number of clients, and that went for a while until the dot-com boom, really around the turn of the century. Had to lay off all our friends. And then my wife, who's a designer, she hated her job. So why don't we work together? And so I think we created at the time one of the first, what I would call UX UI agencies around. And we ended up going to work for Mattel, Fisher Price, a lot of education kind of work. We ended up developing some early digital apps for Burger King, Taco Bell, partnered with a few larger agencies like Razorfish and M&A, that kind of thing.
So did you create the first Barbie Dreamhouse?
We did a lot of like e-commerce stuff. So it really came up through the world of e-commerce, I would say. We had kids and it felt less risky to put our eggs in one basket. So from there, I ended up going to work for a agency called Moodeye, very strange name. And, I was hired to be sort of a creative director, but early on I was thrown into some projects that were more process oriented than deliverables oriented. One was they sent me in as oh my gosh, it was a sink or swim, low prep, white label project for McKinsey & Company, which is a global consultancy. And they said, Scott, we don't know what the job is, but you're going to go to Cisco for a year and you're going to work Monday through Thursday on site. And it's tons of money and you're just going to figure it out and figure out what they need and offer a solution. Well, I got in there on day one and I had never worked for a global consultancy before. And they were asking for somebody to basically develop, the entire program from understanding the problem in the business to coming up with a design solution and determining the ROI for that, return on investment for that. And I had done bits and pieces of that stuff, but I had never really been somebody that had to really own the product from the beginning to the end. I shat my pants on that. It was so far outside my comfort zone. I had no script. And plus I was working with people that had gone to Harvard, Oxford, every Ivy League you can think of. And so I'd say for 2 weeks, I was pretty much like not sleeping at night, trying to get my act together. But somehow in the world, I think of just working with clients, having really had a good experience serving clients and understanding them and listening to them and coming up with strategies and solutions, I learned to listen first and then, develop, kind of look at things from a human-centered, and got it together and really ended up starting to work together with this team really well. And they appreciated my perspectives on things. And before you know it, 6 months went by and I'm leading the program for Cisco, sales to accelerate their internet router business. And so I fell in love I think at that point, what happened is I really fell in love with the intersection of design and business. We have a lot of, in the world of UX UI, there's a lot of design. We have a lot of designers out there that really generate beautiful work. It's creative work and they're talented artists, so to speak. But I think where they struggle is extending that process or make their process understandable to those that are not designers. Design, I would say, by and large, design is not a very accessible process. And in some cases, they, I think, let experts do what they do. But on the other side of the coin, business leaders are not designers by nature. They're business people. They understand the problem. They are subject matter experts in the industries they work in. But they're also not sure. A lot of what I found, a lot of times in service or product opportunities, there's a lot of risk associated with taking new ideas to market. And a lot of times there's this sort of or swim kind of mentality. And what I found is that you can reduce risk through a design process. There's a process called design thinking, which is really centered around, this kind of came out of IDEO in the mid 2000s. And it was perfected at Stanford University D School, where you reduce risk by looking at innovation and new opportunities through a human-centered lens, and you basically prototype your ideas as quickly and as simply as you can to validate a good idea. And in the process of doing that, you bring in an interdisciplinary approach where you bring in people across the organization, and they work together as design practices to come up with innovative solutions. And what it does is it makes the design process less precious, and it makes it more of a collaborative effort. And I think I fell in love with that process at McKinsey, and I think I became a better designer for it. And I also learned how to demystify that process for people who don't normally think like designers. So all of that is to say that I went through that journey. I spent 2 years living out of a suitcase. And then that opportunity ended. And I came home one day, my kids jumped into my arms and said, "I'm so glad, Daddy, that you're done with that crummy job where you were never at home." And I went to work for this gentleman, Makoto and Impact. And it's been a wild ride, taking that expertise, bringing it to Impact, helping the clients at Impact. And And that's where I am today. So it's been a long, meandering journey to get where I am. It's hard to tell up and comers, don't follow my path, because I certainly did not take the straight route to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very short story there, Scott. I mean, do you want more time to
Well, it's
tell?
not, there's no way to compress it anymore because there's just too many pieces to it. And it's really, that is the short story, actually.
Yeah, no, I like the point that you made, especially, what we teach our team and what I've noticed maturing in UX is, you just don't want to be so focused on just the user when you're designing the application, but you have to involve all the other parties, the development constraints, the business goals, marketing, everything, because that plays a huge role into what that application looks like. And so that just naturally gets into what you and I have now done for many clients, and we've evolved it. And I think it's gotten to a point where it's pretty valuable. Like you said, we're de-risking, prioritizing as quickly as possible in just a matter of days, what normally take months, and what we call our product immersion process. And I don't know if you want to get into a little bit. I know you got into a little bit before, but maybe tell some success stories of how we've, what clients face when developing their product and some of the common pitfalls and what we've done to help mitigate a lot of those risks.
Yeah. So I think what I found when I went to work for IiMPACT is that some of the clients that IiMPACT already had were moving forward on delivering on stuff. In other words, they had some that they had generated or had come from internal or external inputs. And they were making things. They were just churning stuff out. And that's fine. I mean, that's productivity to an extent. But what I found is with some of the clients, they were doing a lot of work, and I was looking at it and saying, there's not a lot I'm not seeing a real focus on value, on customer value. And why are we making this stuff? Why is the business churning out what they're churning, to what end? And so I said in some of these cases, let's take a step back and let's look at why, what is the why behind the work that IiMPACT is designing. Now, clients were not necessarily asking IiMPACT to ask the why question. They were, I think, relying on IiMPACT to execute on directions and requirements that were being, and that's fine. That's what, agencies can sometimes do. UX UI agencies can be the executor or the implementer of someone else's strategy. But when there isn't a strategy, or the strategy is a weak one, or it's a top-down, middle management strategy from an organization, and
not communicated well or assumed,
it may not be communicated well. And the part of it is that the folks who have to make the stuff that comes from that, it aren't clear on or don't have ownership of why we're doing this and what success looks like. There's not a lot of excitement around doing the work. So when I came in, I said, look, Makoto, I think we need to, and some of these clients, try to inject a little bit of intention into the work that we're doing. That's risky. You come to a client has hired us to do a certain thing. And now we've got somebody coming in who's saying, well, let's pump the brakes. Let's take a step back, maybe sit down with you and help partner with you on your product strategy. We'd like to be more of a partner in that. We'd like to help you because you have experience in building, or through all of us working together in our various pursuits to this job, have experience in building effective products. And so I think a few of our early engagements when I was on board, and this is where the chief troublemaker piece comes into it, is to try to inject a little bit of product strategy into our service model. And to be honest with you, I think there was some pushback from some clients. It's like, whoa, stay in your lane.
Yeah. What do you think that is? I mean, what's been the job?
Well, it's trust, it's that we didn't hire you to do that. So you're coming back and offering us something we didn't hire you to do. Completely reasonable for a client to say you're getting out of your lane a little bit on this. But I think that there's defensiveness. This is an industry where people prove their worth and you're only as good as the last thing you did. And so I think, people that are a little less secure in their position in the company or their middle management, they haven't been given, the people that we're dealing with aren't in a position to affect change. in the organization. And so they would feel, a little bit of pushback in that, you're asking to make changes and escalate, a change in process that I don't even have an authority to give you. So all of that is completely reasonable. But I think we did have a few clients that said, okay, let's talk about that. And so what I did early on is I think one of the things as a designer that I've evolved in my career has been less about, I started making, as a designer early on, I started making things. I delivered things. I created wireframes. I built, I applied visual design to, low fidelity work and shipped it to clients. And that was great. But now moved into more of, rather than a purveyor of output, I'm more of a purveyor of process and outcomes. And that's just as much design as it is, pixel moves around on a screen. It's just a different part of the process. And so what I tried to do with these clients is say, okay, let's start a process that gets us all on the same page, helps communicate and articulate the strategy of where we're going, both in the short term and the long term. So we did that a few times, a couple of engagements where we said, okay, you want to do something new with your product, your existing product. So let's sit down and let's look at what we want to do let's humanize this process and let's start with business value. So that means what is the business trying to do or achieve? What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve with this initiative? So they were able to answer those questions. Okay, great. And so now we have essentially a few articulated outcomes from doing the work. Now, we make this stuff for people. And so let's talk about them, and in the form of either customers or users or both. What do they want? What do we think they want? And in some cases, the business would know that answer, but in some cases, they might only assume that answer. And so what I've learned in my career is let's not get blocked by what we don't absolutely. Let's make some guesses, and then we'll go back later and validate those guesses. We'll make sure that we were right, but let's just move forward. So I have them then, as a second step, say, what is the customer value on this? What do we think? What change or what behavior change are we going to initiate with this new work? And then we would answer those questions. Then the next step is that we would say, if we know what the business wants, we know what we think the customer wants. Now we can start to articulate solutions that will get us to those assumptions, those outcomes. And what that does is it focuses. If we talk about a new software product, all software products have features. So now when we talk about features, we're constrained in the lens of a really specified set of outcomes for the customer and business. And I always say that creativity thrives in constraints. So that if you tell a group of people in the organization, hey, brainstorm a solution. We got a bunch of problems, but now we need you to come up with a bunch of solutions. You're just going to be all over the map. And so if we've been able to really articulate the problem, now we can really constrain the solutions that we come up with, because we know the problem that we're trying to solve and we know the outcomes that we're moving towards. If what I'm saying starts to sound familiar to business people, because there's nothing new under the sun, and this is in fact a lean canvas that we're talking about. So in the world of Six Sigma and lean thinking, the lean canvas is all about this. There's a 7 or 8 step process, and that's effectively what we're bringing to the customer. And so then from a set of features that then we can narrow down to, we believe these are the core features that will address this problem, both for the business and the customer. We can then at that point really hone in on a set of features that we can sketch ideas towards. And all of this leads to a product roadmap that's user and business focused. And we can triage what we do, what we're going to do as impact. Traditionally, as impact, we will then take those solutions identified and do the work we've always done, which is to build wireframes, prototypes, fully fleshed out designs. But then the work is focused, and all of it maps back to that initial intention. And so we don't have to worry that we're building something that's way out in left field that is doesn't have purpose behind it. And then that answers the why question. Now we've gotten to a point, we've done this enough times with customers where we have kind of a thing going. It's been successful. And so we started, how can we brand service as a solution kind of model, what kind of name can we apply to this that's something we can brand, something we can own. And so we came up with the name Immersion. And so now when we engage with a client, they throw old Scott Harden in first. And the first thing that we do is we get a group of 8 to 10, ideally, in the organization. And it's not just product team, it's product owner, it's operations, if we can get the C, that's great. But we can get members of the C-suite, finance, sales, support. It's got to be in marketing. It's got to be an interdisciplinary group.
And the leaders who make decisions.
That's right. These are the people that can actually affect the change that we design when we come up with a product roadmap. So we call it immersion. We insist now that this is the way to kick off a project with impact. And clients, when they call us up and want to work with us, they often will say, let's get to work. But we always say, whoa, engage with us for a few days with your team, because the time you're going to spend in this workshop with us is going to pay dividends down the road.
It sounds like a lot, but this is actually done within less than a week.
Yeah, well, then that's the thing, right? So the pushback that you might get was, well, I don't have 3 solid, if it takes 3 solid days to do this. But the pushback from us is, otherwise we're going around doing discovery, trying to get requirements, talking to individuals. One person's views may be different from another, which is always the case. And so we think, let's get us all together in a room. And often it's almost like design therapy, because you'll find out that leaders of the organization aren't always on the same page, even though they tell you that they are.
It's ego busting design therapy.
Well, that's it, right? Like, I'm glad you brought up the word ego, because it's like, running a company, there has to be some ego. You're entrusted to do some stuff, and you've come up through the world, and you've got, as you mature through your career, you develop an ego. It's human nature. Our job is to go in there and say, we're in this together, which is often a cliche, but the reality is we have each other's back. If you think about servant leadership, a lot of people that I run into that I think are effective leaders in the organization, they take on a leadership style that's about, I can't do this without my team. This is about we, it's not about me. And I actually find that if you can embody that style of leadership, you actually become a stronger leader, rather than somebody who says, this is all because of me. It's my ego. It's top down.
You're leading from the back versus the front.
Yeah, if you lead from the back, I stand behind my team, and we're going to win because I enable a process by which you, as people who work for me, feel shared ownership and success. I'm going to share my power, and I'm going to share my success with my team. And as a result, we're going to move forward together. We've got each other's back. And I found that that's the way to go. You have better outcomes. You have loyalty like there's no tomorrow. You have a shared purpose. You have a community. You have positive morale. I mean, these are all things that come out of servant leadership. And to your credit, Makoto, and this, I don't want to, puff it.
But, please do.
But you foster that kind of culture at Impact. And you stand behind your team, and you're insanely loyal to the people who do the work. You recognize that we're experts at what we do, and you let success happen. And so I think that's the kind of maturity that we want to impart in organizations that we work with, is take a step back, let your team shine. Nobody knows everything, but together we're going to figure this out. And I think it hasn't been successful every time, but it's been successful enough where we know we're on the right path. And people say that once we've kicked off an engagement in this way, in the right way with immersion, that they're insanely loyal to us as an agency. And so they're, working with Impact has been a game changer for us.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few points there, from working with, especially, I'm not going to name which client, but we have a one wonderful client that we work with, and an individual that we work with a couple of times. And he's even said, I get it now. It's something that, it depends on your maturity of your organization, depends on the egos of people in the room. This is something that is hard to do. It's hard to infect change. And there's going to be resistance towards any type of strategic and process change within their organization. And we've seen this until the one client who has said, you don't know what good is until you've gone through it. And so
Yeah.
your perception of what you think you need to be done to succeed is different than after you've gone through what good UX, what good project strategy is. And this is something that if we can impart this process to people who aren't sure, who've never gone through with it, but then see the value, because you're not investing that much time as compared to the alternative. And if you invest just in this amount of time to bring people together, to really leave the egos at the room, forget the we know what we know mantra, and really try to go through a good process that we've really helped a lot of clients help launch their products. I think they see the value. I mean, really fast, they see this value happen.
Yeah, I think if I touched on something that you said is it builds a culture, and then so it doesn't stop with immersion. So in other words, so we, if we've gone through a successful immersion with a client, then now we built this team with them. It's not about impact versus the client; it's about us together. So it's I said this before, it's kind of a we mentality. We're all one team working together for success, business and customer success. And then now we form this bond. And so now we go to work. And in our process, what we try to do is separate surefire bets that we know their customers will love. And so we don't need to, mess around. We can just get to work. And then there's other work that is out of the immersion process. We've come up with some good ideas, but we don't, it goes back to that point I made, is we think these things will be valuable and innovative, but we don't know for sure. And so to build something out that's, if you put it in a bucket of we don't know for sure, and you just start building that and shipping it, well, there's some risk there, because we might ship something that the client just goes, this is bullshit. I'm not going to use this. This doesn't solve a problem for me. And so then, oops. Yep. And that oops might have cost the organization a lot of money. It could have been millions of dollars later that you find that out. So what we try to do is segregate the work between we think so, but we're not sure, to we're pretty damn sure. And so the first track that we don't know, we're not sure, goes into a track of work called discovery. And then concurrently we segment the stuff that, hey, we're pretty damn sure this is valuable, to a track called implementation. And so if we look at the discovery track, it's about developing the idea to make sure we've got it right. And so we follow, and so then we go to work in things and many agents, there's nothing proprietary here. We start doing things like design sprints. When we talk about design sprints, they're really rapid prototyping. And so we go through a traditional process. You may have heard of it, the sprint, Jake Knapp, the sprint book. It's a Google Ventures process by which you spend a few days together and you take an idea and you target opportunity, and then you sketch out, everybody sketches their ideas, and then we vote on the best ideas, and then we build a prototype, and then we test that prototype with customers. So we take this sort of half-baked idea that came out of immersion, and we say, let's take that idea, let's build a prototype, and let's sit with the customer. And if after we spend a few days with that, and so if the customer looks at the prototype and says, not feeling it, well, in a waterfall world where we spent a bunch of money and they tell us that, oh my God, that would be bad. But in our world of rapid prototyping, that's actually a gift, because we spent 3 or 4 days coming to the outcome of, yeah, this isn't that valuable to me. Okay, we can abandon it. We spent no time. We haven't written any code. And when I say rapid prototypes, these things are like sketches that are stitched together, just enough of the idea so that we can take it to a customer and say, are we on the right track or not? Yeah. Now, if we're on the right track, that's great, because now we can take that then we can drop that gosh, we didn't know idea, the other track of work, which is called implementation. And so that segues into the implementation track. So if we look at that track of work, that's filled with stuff that has been proven. We can establish definition and requirements, or if you're in the user story world, agile world, we can write user stories against. We can really break down that into a very tactical stream of work. And then impact goes straight to work in terms of wireframes, high fidelity design artifacts. We can apply, design systems to that stuff. It's what one might say the, kind of meat and potatoes of UX UI design. And that all of that is very focused on trying to make something as quickly as possible and get it out the door to customers. So I find that if organizations, and keep in mind, a lot of our clients aren't set up that way. They've got a very waterfall approach where they, somebody from on high comes up with business requirements, and then they say, okay, you guys are going to go build this thing, and everybody starts making, keyboards or mouses are clicking, and they start making things without really having, validated a lot of the higher risk stuff. And what you find is you just got a lot of turnover in product organizations because somebody spent a bunch of money building a bunch of shit that didn't really catch on with customers. And so risk, and that's typically how we find a client when we engage with them is very waterfall process, risk, high turnover, people are coming and going, and the business is spending a shit ton of money trying to get to that aha moment.
How many times have we seen where client made a feature and product owner thought that the CEO, whoever thought the feature was going to be valuable, and it turns out nobody's using it?
All the time, more often than not, in fact. And so we come in and say, look, think of impact as, forget all of the buzzwords. We're here to reduce your risk. Like, think of us as saviors of de-risking your enterprise through design. And if you put it in that lens, customers not customers, but, people that we work with, product owners, operations folks, product managers, product chiefs of product are like, that's something that I didn't know that. I realized that your true value impact is reducing the risk of my enterprise. And by the way, you do work on top of it too. And I think that for an organization our size, that's a pretty mature way to look at things. I often say that in some sense, in some of the work we do, we're kind of like a little mini McKinsey when it comes to this kind of, especially when it comes to carving out innovation and helping clients accelerate their visions faster. We do what we do. We do the work of what organizations who are 50 times the size, charge 50 times as much, are 50 times less agile. You can hire us. We come in, we're your little de-risking crackerjack, SWAT team, drop us, in parachutes into your boardroom. Somebody once said it's from, what was that?
From board to code.
From board to code. But if you look at that, it might be kind of a one-off comment, but it's really, there's something to it. It's like we can take something that's ethereal and go along the entire design lifecycle from ideation. Business says, hey, this is a great idea, through innovation, through implementation, and then validation and deployment. And we're there at every stage of the way. And and that's value. I think there's a lot of organizations that are our size that can deliver on that. And I think that's pretty unique.
Yeah. And I think, one of the questions obviously sets our company apart from others in the industry. And I think you nailed it right there where, some companies will do some of that strategic work up front, deliver, we're done, good luck with you. And we know after that happens, when development gets in there, when people start to look into it, things deeper, all these constraints and changes can happen. And if you're not in there during the process, guess what? You're going to have to hire that company back over, charge for all those different changes. We know whatever we recommend, we stand behind. We're not order takers. We have a lot of experience where we know and we want to suggest, even if it's hard to hear, what are some good suggestions? And if it doesn't work out, we stand behind making sure that we follow through and say, hey, well, let's come up with a better solution that works within the constraints that or whatever the feedback is, let's change it to make it for the better.
I think that one of the unique value propositions of Impact is that we have so much skill from strategy to deliver to implementation that we can plug in anywhere in that journey. And we'd love to have the entire piece of the pie, right? Or the entire pie, I guess is what I should say. We're agile enough to come in at any stage in that journey and deliver value. And because we work in such a inclusive way, and that we're so accessible and we communicate design really well to the client, I think we find that over time, even if we were only brought in for a segment of the design journey, we end up capturing more of it, and pretty quickly. And, this may sound gushy and mushy, but I think that because of the way we work and that we're so accessible and so approachable, we've made some lifelong friends in the work that we do. I really am proud that in most of the engagements that we have, they become friends. They become members of the family. I mean, each of us go on to do other things in our lives that are not just design related. We get so close to these clients that we share about our private lives with these clients, and they become fans of, and vice versa. And so, I remember Makoto and I flew to Houston the other day, and just sat down with our clients in a personal setting, and they're just friends. And so all of that has become really that's why I love the culture that we have at Impact, because it's not, I haven't seen that everywhere. A lot of people, when I talk to my friends, my colleagues who work for other, organizations, they're like, oh, wow, you did that? Oh, you guys are doing that kind of work? I mean, that's amazing. I think part of also what makes it work is we're a very lean organization, and all of our impactors are very adapted at crossing all kinds of areas of expertise. We're jacks of all trades to some extent. And so
I think we've been in almost every industry at this point.
Well, not only every industry, but every discipline within design. So we're all good designers from output standpoint, but many of us can also, pick up and help with facilitating, these workshops that we do.
I think you're still the master at the facilitation. If people think it's easy to facilitate and herd cats, it's not.
Well, I love doing it. And that's the thing. It's like, we talked about this. It's like being a purveyor of process rather than the actual output that the organization creates. I've become a little rusty when it comes to actually picking up Figma and designing something. It takes me, 8 hours that it would take Makoto or someone else an hour to do. My tools are, whiteboard markers and sticky notes and voting dots. It's very old school, but that's design all the same. It's just like I said, you become the purveyor of the means to the end. And in that work, it's amazing. You just get involved in so many areas of subject matter expertise that it's like business school. You engage with a client, and I'm just like, what am I going to learn in this process that I didn't know? What area of business what market am I going to learn more about just by doing the engagement? Because the process is consistent. It doesn't matter what it is you're trying to. That's why it's sort of like making a product out of the service model that we have, because we can apply the same design thinking framework to anything. It doesn't matter what it could be. Education, it could be medical, it could be engineering, it could be anything. And in fact, the solutions that we come up with don't always have to be digital. They can be service. It can be operations. We were called in one time to reduce the business outcome was, to reduce onboarding a new customer 80%. And we came in there, and the solutions, some of the portfolio solution was digital, design a 5 minutes or less, website building tool to get the customer into the e-commerce world really quickly through an innovative wizard. But part of it was also, how can the organization deploy hardware to the customer faster? And that's service design, right? That's operations stuff. And those prototypes look different than digital prototypes do. I remember another engagement that we had where, how do we extol the virtue of our in-restaurant service offering? And so the solution ended up being create a customer engagement center at the headquarters of the business. And that's totally physical. I mean, that's designing a space. We brought in an architect, a designer, to create a 3-dimensional walkthrough what that customer engagement center would look like. And that's, not the outcome is not digital. The outcome is physical. But the process by which getting to that solution is the same as if it was physical or digital. It does not matter. And that's nice about it, because we know the process works. So every client who's like, well, my situation is different than anything we see on your website, it doesn't matter, because we're going to take you through the same immersion. We're going to take you through the same canvas building. And then when we identify solutions to the problems, the design thinking that we're going to employ to get to those outcomes is going to be the same. Maybe the artifact at the end is different, but the process is the same.
And not only from an immersion standpoint, but also, we've done groups of what we always recommend is 8 to 10, but it always tends to be much larger. But you've even done immersions at, and even KPIs and things like that, where we've run through some of those workshops where it could be, I think we had 50 people.
Well, yeah. And so there's a different, when a client says, we really have to align the entire organization, and that's over 50 people, like you said, it's a large group. And so what we've done in those cases is we rented or set up in a hotel or a convention center or something like that. And then it's about breaking the groups into sub-working groups and then coming back as a whole. And then that process does change a little bit because you have to manage really large groups of people in a way so that when they're thinking about ideas, when they're focusing on a particular problem, you do still get to those kind of 8 to, the magic number for being focused on a problem and coming up with a solution. The reason why I say 8 to 10, any less than that, and you risk not having a group that's diverse enough. Other than that, you start duplicating the parity that you have in the group, and it's more likely that you're going to take longer to execute. That the whole idea of creating interdisciplinary groups working together in workshops like this is to get to outcomes faster. And so you lose that benefit when you have a huge cluster of people in a room. So even when you do have 50 people, you have to work out ways. That's why hackathons are the way that they are, is that, you come up in a large group setting, you define the problem, and then you break into, small group working methodologies, and they come back together, but they're still working in smaller groups. It's just a lot of concurrent work is going on. I personally had a service design engagement where I had to go engage with a school district, and we had a solution generating event at the convention center with 300 people. That was really tough. But we were able to break them into working groups and it took one day, and we were able to get to where we needed to get to at the end of the day. And you really had to, even though it was 300 people, you were able to break it down. We used all the rooms in the lower level of this convention center to really get those groups into smaller groups so that they could actually work functionally well together.
Yeah, I can imagine the personalities in that room.
Yeah, it's a lot of personalities, and that's part of the work of being a facilitator of this process. Is anybody who's going to do that work they have to love people, and they have to love them for who they are. And a lot of times we go through life trying to change the people that we're working with. Like, if you could just be more of this, or you could just be more of that, it would be great. And people are flawed, and they're humans. And as designers, we go into this organization we go into this line of work thinking, we're doing this work to make people's lives better in some capacity, whether it's, I want to order food faster, I want to, onboard a customer faster, I want to make sure the customer makes more money. We're trying to improve people's lives in some way. That's why we say we do the work that we do. This kind of facilitation work that I'm doing requires empathy in that, I'm going to make this work with the personalities that I have in the room. And there's always a dick in the room. There's always somebody who wants to please. There's always, that's the beauty of this work, is there's that, in an environment like this, you have to learn to kind of leverage the personalities. Sometimes it's great to have somebody in the room who is a naysayer, because they're your reality check. Like, they're going to look at this marvelous new idea that we come up with as a design team, and they're going to throw darts at it. And frankly, that's the world we live in. You're never going to please everyone. So it's nice to have somebody who's grounded in a little bit, a bit of a downer, just as much as it's great to have somebody who's a total optimist in the room. And, my experience working at McKinsey was interesting, because when they create tiger teams to go to the client and help solve problems, they go through a Myers-Briggs process where they try to build these teams where it's not just interdisciplinary subject matter expertise, but it's also personality differentiation. I'm an eternal optimist. I've got a smile on my face. We can make it if we try. I'm an eternal 80s movie type of person, where it's at the end, the guy gets the girl and everybody's so happy, and we jump up in the air and there's a freeze frame. That's my personality.
Knight Rider, Airwolf, or MacGyver.
Total Knight Rider. And there's always a great ending, and it's great. But I probably need to be paired with somebody who's a little bit of a downer. because otherwise I'm going to be in the clouds the whole time. And I may actually miss catching a real reality that we'll have to solve for when we generate a solution. My wife is the opposite. She's like firmly both feet on the ground. Like, come back, Scott, back. And that's why we work so well together, because she keeps me in check. Otherwise, yeah, like I say, I'd be out in the stratosphere. And she's very grounded in reality. So you need that kind of yin and yang to not misappropriate a cultural term in some way, but to say, that there's balance to it, parity. And that's why we advocate for this 8 to 10 number of people that's ideal for when you're trying to solve a problem, because you've got a balance of personalities in the room, and you actually absolutely need that.
Yeah, I have not yet seen any negative reaction to any of the workshops that you have led with. I don't know how many we've done so far, but everybody usually comes out pretty positive. They're going in there a little bit skeptical at first, but then when they come out, I think the track record has been pretty much batting 100%. So
yeah, I think the biggest risk to failure after the work that we do, thank you for that, but I think the biggest risk that we see is that the people that we had in the room, and this goes back to something I said earlier about, they are not the people empowered to affect the change that we design. And so we've tried to get better as we engage with clients to say, not just say, oh, here's a group of people, have fun with those people that we have assigned to this project, but just to say, wait a minute, take a step back here and look at, are these the right people who are going to advocate for this change when we're done? And do they have the power to advocate for it? It doesn't necessarily mean that the C-suite has to be in the room. But the C-suite has to have blessed the plan, and they're the ones that need to share some of their power with the people in the room because they did the work. There's 2 clarifications I want to make about this about design thinking. The biggest criticism of design thinking is, it's rule by committee. Absolutely not. What it is, a group of experts telling someone whom I call the decider, the person who's accountable for the solution, they think he or she should do. And so in this work that we do, one of the first things we do is say, who in this room is the decider? At the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision. And while the work that we do in the workshops might be, we take votes on things, we share opinion, we come to consensus, we come to some determination. All that does is it's meant to tell the decider, this is what your team, whom you empowered to help me figure out what the F I'm going to do, and forces that person, that decider, to turn around at the end once they've done all that and say, I agree with you or I don't agree with you. But I'll tell you this, in the room, we've seen a decider turn around and say, I disagree. This is what we're going to do. And you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but they have to articulate their reasoning for that in front of this group. Because what we see in siloed organizations is a bunch of people say, this is what I think you should do, one at a time. And then the decider goes off and just does their own thing, and nobody understands why, and they feel disenfranchised. The nice thing about, this design thinking process is that this team with the decider has to give voice and convince the decider what they think he or she should do. And then the decider can agree with them or disagree with them, but it happens in the room, and it's incredibly motivating, even if they decide to do something different.
So you're taking a logical approach to thinking by understanding other people's perspectives and bringing that into a corporate environment, which they tend to block a lot of that logical decision making.
That's a great way of summarizing it, because I think that's exactly what it is. Like, we're trying to bring democracy into corporations, and democracy is messy. This is maybe we can superimpose the graphic, but there's this classic model of design thinking to try to get from uncertainty to certainty. There's a squiggly line, and it's all crazy. It looks like, intertwined, string. And over the course of from left to right on the graphic, you have the squiggliness of uncertainty, and then slowly the line smooths out, and by the end, it's completely smooth. And so when you embrace this type of working, you come into a problem and you have a bunch of people. One of the first things I say is embrace discomfort, embrace disorder, because in the beginning, we're going to be going in different directions to try to get to the right answer. But we are absolutely going to get to the right answer. Don't even worry about that. But it's going to take some discomfort trust the process, and we will get to a desired outcome by the end of this. And that's, like you said before, a client who's not used to this way of working is extremely uncomfortable in that environment sometimes. They might even try to shut it down, but we always say, just stick with us, because we are going to get to a focused, defined outcome by the end of this, as long as everyone stays engaged. And the biggest thing about that is people have to stay engaged. And this opens up sort of a discussion around virtual versus in person. So a lot of this work that when I came on board at IiMPACT, this was before the pandemic, and Makoto, you and I were flying all over the country, like doing these kinds of exercises in our clients' offices, in boardrooms, or wherever we do it. And then the pandemic came and shut all that down. And so we had to learn to adapt the work that we're doing in a virtual model. And that was tough. You can spend all day in a room with your colleagues with, refreshments and lunch and candy and all that good stuff. And you could power through a 9 to 5 in a space together, because you're up, you're moving, but suddenly you're shutting all that down and you're on, Miro or some whiteboarding tool on a Zoom call. You can't spend a whole day sitting at your desk in front of a computer. You've got to break it up. And so what we found was we had to take an all-day session and break it into multiple segments, separated by at least a couple of hours of doing that. So it did extend the timeframes a little bit, and some of the value proposition of the work they were doing, where we said you could do this in a number of days. It might take a little longer just because it's online. But now that the pandemic is over, we still offer the choice. Can we do this virtually? Can we do it in person? I don't know what your preference is. I'm an old school kind of guy. I like the in-person piece of it, going back and being in a room where I can see faces. So if somebody's not engaged, or they're bored, or they're not, participating, I can zero in on that. It's a little harder in a Zoom meeting to have that kind of visual feedback.
I mean, the personal face-to-face is always strengthen our relationship with clients versus virtual. But I understand budget-wise, timing, whatever. If everybody's distributed, virtual is more convenient for these type of things in that respect. So
it's interesting. It's like, and I think that's a discussion. And if we ever get into a discussion about literally step by step what the process is and how we do it, there's so many learned things from, I'll say this, doing a virtual, if we're using a digital tool like Miro to do the work, it's much easier to organize the work, digitally than it is. We should superimpose some pictures of what the rooms look like when we do these kinds of workshops in person. There isn't a space on the wall that doesn't have notes and writing and butcher paper and all kinds of, that's one of the most satisfying things, is after, 2 to 3 days with our clients, and every surface in the room is covered with stuff. And that's pretty a satisfying feeling. It's like, and then of course having to capture all that and synthesize it down and break it down into, something that's digital later is a bit of effort, but it's neat. It's like we've gone, everything that's in our brains is now on the wall. And so now you can look back and say, this is the group's mind, hive mind, splayed out on these walls. It's pretty cool. It actually kind of looks like a crime scene. Like we're doing some sort of, analysis of the murder that took place in this room. Lines of yarn from one thing to the next, and, trying to draw relationships between ideas. And somebody who hadn't been in the room and hadn't seen that process play out would say, what the fuck's going on in here?
Just need somebody with the sunglasses that takes it off. Play some music.
And then has sunglasses underneath.
I think this might be a good time to maybe ask you one final question before we wrap up. So if you could work on any type of project or with any client, what would your dream project be?
Well, my heart, as Makoto, my heart is in education. And, I've fought over the years. My kids are in public school. And so I've really fallen in love with of education in our community. I think worldwide and nationwide, we do not prioritize education the way it should be prioritized. So I would love to work on something that's education related. and possibly not for profit either, which, I think that's the thing. I mean, I think that there's improvements that we need to make on the service model of delivering education to kids. We fall down so often in helping our marginalized communities really get the right education they need to succeed, go on to college and have a career. So I would love to work at, it would be great if we could partner with an education nonprofit or the US government for that matter to think about how we can effectively use both digital and physical tools close achievement gaps. And that's a big window to drive opportunity through. But we have been successful, I think, we're in so many market sectors: energy, entertainment,
robotics to energy.
Yeah, all those things. I think we're strong in a lot of different areas. I think we're not as strong as we could be in education. I would love to get more into that space. There's just so much opportunity there. And how does AI play a role in education? I mean, I think that we're just starting to think about how we can automate certain processes and actually not only automate, but differentiate instruction. I think that's really what it comes down to is I learn differently than you do. We're all individuals when it comes to learning. I have a child that's really, twice exceptional from learning. She's nerd. And so AI, I think, can be a strong to get into to really give her the kind of differentiated instruction she needs to succeed in school. Our classroom models are like, 43 kids in a classroom and there's one teacher. And maybe if you're lucky, 10% of the classroom is picking up on the material, the rest are looking out the window. And so how does AI become a partner in helping the teacher reach all of those kids in the way that's, specific for them? So I'd love for us to get into that space. I think there's so much opportunity there. So get to work, Makoto, and get us some service design opportunities in education. That would be the way to go.
There you go. Well, hopefully that can happen. Definitely want to encourage any listeners to share their thoughts and experiences on the topics we discussed today. Want to thank Scott. As always, a pleasure to talk to you, joke around, and we'll do many of these other things. Obviously, any listeners want to submit questions or future episode suggestions, please do in the comments. Do all the great likes, subscribe, and review, whatever you can to support us. And check out our website, Impact, 3 I's, not any more, not any less, .io. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.